Hello, thank you so much for tuning in to CAN TV Channel 21. My name is Estrella Vargas, and today I have the honor of interviewing Charlie Serrano and Cristina Pasiones Sayas, both from the Puerto Rican Agenda. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Estrella, for having us and inviting us here.
Yes, so today is an important topic. It's not holistically a positive one, but it's one that has to be said and spoken because it's very important for the livelihood of a group of a population in the world. So before we talk about the specific topic of today, which is the crisis in Puerto Rico and after Hurricane Irma and Maria, we're going to talk about the Puerto Rican Agenda and its impact here in Chicago, in the U.S. as a whole, and on the island of Puerto Rico. So can you tell us a little bit more about the Puerto Rican Agenda?
Sure. So the Puerto Rican Agenda is a local nonprofit that's kind of started as an organic body of community leaders. Essentially in 1995, folks came together to really say, we need to establish a collective agenda to advance our community and specifically to take on issues around policy at a local level, a state level, an international level, as well as a federal level. And so there have been various campaigns that the Puerto Rican Agenda has initiated and successfully executed. And so those areas in which we primarily focus our work is around affordable housing, ensuring access to quality education, self-determination, self-actualization, representation in government, as well as like some of our humanitarian crises, which we'll talk a little bit more in terms of how the island was impacted by the hurricane.
Okay, great. So why are we still talking about, so the Hurricane Maria struck about, a little bit over 10 months ago. So why are we still talking about, like repairing the island and, the constant need that Puerto Rico needs and the representation it's like asking for? So why are we here still talking about it?
I think we still talk about Puerto Rico because there are some very serious issues. There are issues around inadequacies and issues relating to how we respond to disasters in particular areas. The way we're responding to the fires in California, totally different. How we're responding to disasters in Puerto Rico, in New Orleans. We talked about New Orleans for 4 years. We talked about New Jersey when the hurricane hit New Jersey and the governor was so upset that people were not responding and things. This went on for a couple of years. But we saw things like the oil spill in Valdez way before your time back in '89. And we talked about that for 5 or 6 years. And it wasn't until 14 years later that Exxon actually gave up out of a lawsuit of $5 billion, just $500 million that they paid in fines. So we talk about Puerto Rico because there's a very serious issue here. And it's one about attention from the federal government. It's one about inadequate services. It's about a total disregard for life in Puerto Rico. 4,800 people lost their lives as a result of this hurricane. And that lack of attention in the federal agencies and all the folks that needed to respond in a timely manner, because it happened in Puerto Rico, because whenever it hits in the poor areas of Texas, because when it hit New Orleans and it dealt with African Americans, that there is no attention. The core of that is an underlying institutionalized racism and institutionalized favoritism and bias towards poor people and people that do not have the appropriate representation, lobbyists, money, and things like that. A hurricane hits Lake Forest, we totally pay attention a little bit different than if it hit Humboldt Park or Inglewood, and that's
Yeah, and I mean, I think to just add is that, you know, it's not a Puerto Rican problem, it's fundamentally an American problem. And a lot of that has to do with the relationship that the United States has imposed on Puerto Rico. And so there's this colonial relationship that has been in place for centuries and still is existing. And what the hurricane has been able to do is sort of unearth and bring that discussion back to the surface. So that we can really start to talk about root cause issues. As Charlie alluded to, if we were a state, and particularly if we were a state that was populated by people who benefit from white privilege, we would absolutely have seen a totally different response.
Yes, and so you were saying that once the hurricane struck, like, you obviously didn't see a lot of support from, you know, the U.S. government, and so now, like 10 months and plus after, you know, are you still seeing that, like, media coverage, like aid being given to Puerto Rico
Well, look,
from the U.S. government? Like,
we have 1,100 families without electricity in the city of Comerío, less than 20 miles from the coast and the San Juan area and Bayamón. 1,100 families, 1,100 families that the agenda goes there to provide support and services, and we still hear generators. This is crazy. Even if Puerto Rico was a state, but it still involved Puerto Ricans, we would still be under the same situation. Not a lot would change in that matter, because the poor areas of Texas never got attention as they needed, and it was very difficult for the state agencies that can provide services because of the infrastructure that FEMA have in this that cannot supply services. We had the experience of getting there pretty early, of getting into Puerto Rico. And we spoke to FEMA folks, we spoke to HUD people that were equally frustrated at a certain level, because the top echelon of administration from the White House down did not have the focus or the demand on that structure, on that infrastructure to deliver these services, to pay attention to where it's needed. So, you know, we just had, 16 or 26 people had died. This was so totally erroneous. I had a relative in my house in Puerto Rico that died, a week and a half later. A week into that time, there was no water. People were drinking beer and Coke.
wow.
And people that were overweight, people that had needed diabetes medicine, that needed to refrigerate it. My brother had to be taken out of Puerto Rico because of that, because there's no refrigeration for medical services, and these people died. And these people died, and some not even accounted for. And we'll see. We'll get to that point of close to 5, if not 6,000 people passed away in this hurricane.
So how you said that the Puerto Rican Agenda, was the first one on, like, the scene, and, like, was like helping the Puerto Rico since the beginning, since the first week. I'm gonna show a video that you all created where you highlight a few of the, like, impacts that you had right then and there, and then we can talk about more of, like, how the Puerto Rican Agenda, like, has, like, impacted the island and how much help it has done for your brothers and sisters. So.
It's nearly 7 months since the infamous Category 4 Hurricane Maria delivered a devastating blow to the topography and already economically fragile Isla del Encanto, Puerto Rico.
In early September, when we got word of Hurricane Irma making its way towards Puerto Rico, we came together as a collective, confused because all the media attention was being directed to Florida, Louisiana, Texas, and we knew we needed to do something to call out the fact that Puerto Rico was being excluded from the public discourse. So we called a press conference on September 8th.
Good afternoon. My name is Cristina Pacioni-Zayas. I'm the co-chair of the Puerto Rican Agenda, and I stand here in solidarity with community leaders across Humboldt Park who represent the Puerto Rican diaspora.
I believe that the Puerto Rican Agenda's rapid response and organized response was due to the fact that we already had entered into discussions prior to Hurricane Maria actually prior to Hurricane Irma, that we were not going to do something that was based on just an emergency response.
Within 48 hours, members assessed the immediate needs on the island, purchased pallets of emergency supplies, secured transportation courtesy of Custom Trucking Company, and loaded the first cargo plane underwritten by United Airlines. Supplies arrived in San Juan, Puerto Rico on Monday, September 25th, and were received by Mayor Carmen Yulín Cruz for distribution across the island.
We are dying, and you are killing us with the inefficiency and the bureaucracy. We will make it with or without you. Because what stands behind me is all due to the generosity of other people. Again, this is what we got last night. 4 pallets of water, 3 pallets of meals, and 12 pallets of infant food, which I gave them to Comerío, where people are drinking off a creek.
Can you give me more details on how the Puerto Rican Agenda has helped Puerto Rico after the hurricane hit?
Sure. So what was referenced in the video in terms of our strategy is that we started to enter these discussions prior to Hurricane Irma. And immediately after the press conference that was shown in that video, we had an emergency meeting. We established a task force to really start to articulate what would be the criteria in which, as we fundraise, how do we deploy those resources? And we wanted to be very intentional about it. And so we laid out the following criteria. First, we needed to make sure that, resources and funds were going to the hardest hit areas. Second, we really wanted to leverage the relationships that we had with municipalities as well as non-government organizations on the island, because we wanted to ensure that resources and dollars would actually get to the individuals most in need. The other criteria was really to think strategically about stimulating the local economy. We did not want to undermine the local economy with us sending supplies. And what I mean by that is that a bottle of water we purchase here for, in a case, 25 cents per bottle. By the time we ship it out there, it's $10 a bottle. So that's not really an effective use of resources. And so all of this was really kind of set up the framework of our intentionality of how we would start up our campaign for fundraising. And so that week that Maria hit, it was a Wednesday, and we had already put in motion plans to hold the first community fundraiser that Friday, so 2 days after it hit, really taking advantage of the opportunity. Like, people were really feeling like they needed to do something. Mm-hmm. And it was such an amazing space and place because it was hosted in the community at the Segundo Ruiz Balbes Cultural Center. We brought together artists, local artists from the community that did visual arts and performances, as well as we had a silent auction. And that night we raised $70,000. Wow. And we had a huge portion of that from the National Museum of Puerto Rican Arts and Culture, because they had their gala the day before and they had donated to our campaign the proceeds from their live auction. And so with that money, we were then able to literally over that weekend devise a plan to get this money in motion to Puerto Rico. And so from Friday to Saturday, we met with Congressman Luis Gutierrez. We were able to leverage our friendship and partnership with him. He then contacted the mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, who then put us in connection with United. And that's how we were able to get the plane in kind. And then we went to Sam's Club and just started purchasing pallets of emergency supplies. So Friday we get the money, Saturday we get the plan, Sunday we go shopping, we get the pallets out to the airport, and Monday that flight takes off first thing in the morning. Wow. So we were the first organization local community-based organization that was able to get a flight off the ground and land it in Puerto Rico. And one other thing to note is that we have a standing relationship with the mayor of San Juan. And so we were really able to feel confident that she would not only receive these resources, but then utilize them in a way that she wouldn't just hoard them for San Juan, but she put them in the distribution chain, as she had mentioned in the clip. And so that was the first iteration of our campaign, Pallets and Planes. We didn't want to spend time collecting supplies and donations from people and spending time packaging and trying to figure out a way to get them to Puerto Rico, because it's not just a car ride away. We really wanted to, respond immediately, make a meaningful impact, and do it in an effective way. And we felt that engaging in those activities just is a drain of energy and resources. But then, we did, and that's what we were able to do 3 times over. We sent 3 flights out with these supplies and generators. But then we started to transition once the economy stabilized slightly on the island, and we really wanted to stimulate the local economy. So now our funds were going to go towards purchasing pallets on the island with Puerto Rican-owned businesses. And so we had a relationship with Econo Supermarkets as well as Sam's Club. Congressman Gutierrez went out on our behalf again, took our funds, and purchased supplies to fill 2 truckloads per town of emergency supplies. And in that specific visit, we were able to distribute resources to 4 different towns. So 3 in the interior, Comerío, Barranquita, Say Bonito, and then 1 on the coast, Luisa. And so that was another way that we can contribute meaningfully. We can make, an immediate impact. And that also kind of sparked another element of our campaign about issuing micro grants. So we would have organizations as well as municipalities approach us about making a small investment in some of their rebuilding efforts and some of their relief efforts. And based on our criteria, we were then able to evaluate that, make some decisions, and usually send a member out to deliver the donation directly to those individuals and maintain the relationship and see how it's implemented. But since then, we've started to kind of evolve the campaign, and now it's the 3 R's for PR: rescue, relief, and rebuild. And we'll talk more detail about what that all entails. But Charlie was one of our members that was able to go out in December, and we had a big revival around 3 Kings Day. So he hit 8 towns and was able to deliver donations that kept that tradition alive and brought a little bit of joy in these difficult times. But that really helped to establish our presence on the island. As being a supporter, working with our brothers and sisters on the island, not doing things to them, not being paternalistic. And so I don't know if you want to share.
Yeah, that was a major focus of ours, was more in the strategic planning of this. The Puerto Rican Agenda has no employees. No one is employed by the Puerto Rican Agenda. It is a 100% totally volunteer organization. We have somewhere around 300 folks that say they're members of the Puerto Rican Agenda, and we meet once a month and we function as committees. We have committees on housing, committees on economic development, on education, and people volunteer for these committees. These committees meet and they're on projects that are selected at the agenda. So what makes a difference months before the hurricane hits is that we're already focused about thinking about Puerto Rico. We had been engaged in a couple of projects in Puerto Rico, and we're thinking about this. But in the agenda are folks that have worked in national disasters with the Red Cross, people that have been in the military, people that have had this experience, people that know about boating, know about reading maps and look at a hurricane coming and knows what these are. That was a tremendous benefit because we sat there days before and we knew how that was going to hit. We also had people that were in Puerto Rico. We have agenda members in Puerto Rico. That made a big difference. So when Jose Lopez, one of our mentors and guides, is talking about the preparation, about 15 days afterwards, when we did our first event, we sat down and we said, we have been meeting every single day for 15 days There were people that had only slept 2 or 3 hours for 15 days to be able to put this together. Everything from the donations to put that, and we had planned that then we'll go in December. We got wind that a lot of community organizations in Puerto Rico that would have for poor children Three Kings Day parties, festivals, and hand out gifts were not getting any. They could not have that. And some of us got together and we said, let's go to Puerto Rico and we pay our own way. We figure out the logistics. We'll rent a van and we'll get requests. And we went in 10 days to 8 cities and did that project. That was just one project that from there other projects have evolved. And I think what the agenda does is that it really plans out. You cannot do this with volunteers without a real strategy. And I think it's the capacity of the agenda. It's the individuals, each individual that is in charge of committees, the co-chairs, the members that are able to do this. We're always surprised. Christina and I, we have a lot of conversations about getting things done and moving things, but the capacity, she is the co-chair, and we all watch her, how she has to maneuver all these high energy people that own businesses, that are professionals, that are well trained and know things and want to do everything, and we have to lock these things. And I think that is what makes the agenda unique in the whole of the United States. In Puerto Rico, when we go, it was our, we think that we give to Puerto Rico when we go out there. And it's really Puerto Rico giving to us. We were born here in the States, and we feel that attachment somewhere where our grandparents were from. And that's the experience and what means so much to us as Puerto Rican Americans to be able to go down there and to do this. I think no one else has made the impact like the Puerto Rican Agenda of Chicago, especially as we move forward. And we've moved into strategically taking steps into where we're at now.
Yes, and overall, it seems like, relationships is key to like the impact you have already made in Puerto Rico, like, knowing the people, having members who live and experience life in Puerto Rico, and like knowing, what areas need the most, like
Look,
help
the relationships, what you're saying is so important, because in so many occasions we're sitting in a meeting and people are saying, who knows this mayor?
Exactly.
Who's related to this mayor? Who knows this? We cannot go another second without mentioning the impact that Alderman Roberto Maldonado had on everything we were doing, because he pulled every single thing possible. He was one of our greatest supporters, the Congressman Gutierrez and his wife that went down to Puerto Rico, because he's able to maneuver and go around faster and better. So we entrusted him with the funds and those things took place. Even Governor Rauner, but Sanguinetti, the lieutenant governor, who came out and also called up folks, and they had people from the National Guard. It was every single player that we went to, and this was so critical because these were personal relationships of many of our members. Our members have personal relationships with folks and in towns and in cities that we were able to, to call. And what we're doing now makes an impact that no one else is able to do.
Exactly.
And I would just also add to, I think it's the collective impact of the critical mass of talent. You have people that not only have a deep compassion and connection to the island, but as Charlie said, people who are like on top of their game in the professional world and have a very wide network and really leveraging all of those opportunities. And where somebody said, no, we just go and try another angle. And I mean, we just really were persistent and tenacious and ultimately like committed, irrespective of like how we interact with each other socially or whether we just met yesterday. All of us had a single vision, and that vision was to respond and to be immediate and to be like effective. And so I think everybody like bought into that and really brought their best selves to this and continue to do so. And that's really what has been, I think, the signature of the Puerto Rican Agenda.
It's contagious.
Yes, because everybody's engaged. Everybody knew something. There was nothing. I think, I don't want to say it that way, but there was nothing that nobody could have brought up that we could not do. We could do. There was nothing. We needed a truck. We would call somebody,
Yep.
somebody's relative owned a trucking company. Hey, what would it take to do this?
Yeah.
What would it take to go there? There was a baseball player, a famous Puerto Rican baseball player that called a writer and producer that was a member of the agenda and told him, hey, do you guys know anybody that's collecting stuff? Because we give for 350 kids, we give every 3 kings and we don't have toys. Please. What was that for? We got him connected with people in Orlando that were collecting toys. He sent it, and then we gathered some funds, and we went over there, and we did 700 kids, 4 events in one town. And then while we're in the hotel, I called Christina, and I said, I have a girl here that's stuck in the hotel with 40 kids. Can we give them and do a party?
Oh,
and we went ahead and did that, and you remember there's no ATM machines, so we have to be
Yeah.
carrying this cash or figure somebody that we can, hey, can you lend us some cash so we can give it? So these were things that were just done on the spot that made a big difference. And like, this is just me, but there's like tons of, dozens of people that went to Puerto Rico with that same project. And I think it is the core of the Puerto Rican agenda to help Puerto Rico and the Puerto Ricans at the same time ourselves, to be able to reaffirm that identity, who we are, where we're at, what is that island, what does it mean? That is critical for us. And that's what we're all bought into.
Exactly. So, overall, talking about relationships, like when we talk about the 3 R's for PR, I mean, relationship is not one of the R's, but
Right.
can you talk a little bit about just like a little snippet of the 3 R's for PR and how it started? And then we can get to the first one and show a video about it.
Sure. So that kind of that 3R for PR slogan came from looking at what have we already done, right? So the relief work, the first R is relief. And so it really was looking at, what we sent to Puerto Rico, how we immediately responded, how we were first responders, right? The rescue piece is about the resettlement. And it's about supporting those individuals that were coming to Chicago temporarily or permanently, and really making sure that they had the resources available, the wraparound services necessary, so that they would be able to, whether they're staying here a few weeks or whether they're permanently settling, they essentially had a welcome mat and all the necessary social services to be able to set up their life. And the last R is rebuild. And so rebuild is all about our projects about looking at opportunities to leverage sustainable energy and reimagining Puerto Rico so that it can be brought up to the 21st century in terms of how we leverage solar power, how we leverage thermal energy, how we leverage wind power. I mean, Puerto Rico is uniquely positioned to be able to really take in all of these natural elements at no cost and really generate a ton of energy. And so we can talk more about the specifics, but I mean, there's been very concrete projects and investments that we've made in certain towns that will make a substantial difference in the way that folks live.
Okay, so we're gonna go to the first video, which speaks on the relief effort part of the 3 R's.
I never thought of myself, I have to tell you, brothers and sisters, listen, I never thought of myself packing Spam and arroz and habichuelas and these things and putting them in a maleta to take to Puerto Rico. I never thought I'd see the day, but that's what you gotta do. And I'm not the only one that did it, right? Every time I got on that plane, I saw so many wonderful Puerto Rican young men and women taking care of their moms and their grandmas and going down there and taking care of them.
The Puerto Rican Agenda's signature strategy was crystallized. They resolved to spend their energy fundraising to purchase ballots directly from Puerto Rican distributors and work closely with Puerto Rican officials and nonprofit organizations to distribute supplies and issue micrograms.
Son las 8 de la mañana, ya a las 9 estamos allí, pero hay que volver y llenar este trote de nuevo y volver a Loíza Aldea hoy. Y mañana pues vamos a traer 3, porque vamos a tener esta cantidad 2 veces, más 20 matres que acabamos de comprar.
It's really touching to see the people we now know, you know, as relation, like the mayor of Comerío, who we went to his house early on, and we knew that if we had coffee, do you know what I mean? It was warmed up by a tank of gas, you know, that was there, that we can hear the generator going in the background. And we filmed all of these things. We were very fortunate that we have people that have equipment, and we had writers, producers, film people that are members of the agenda and went there. But I think what the congressman is saying is every single plane of the 3 that we sent, when we brought it back, we filled it with people. These were planes that were paid for. We just brought whoever was in the airport or people that were in need to bring them back and bring them into Chicago, into the receiving station that had been created by a whole team of agenda members. I think looking back, we're very prepared now. There's a whole bunch of things that we could have done even better, but we went to other organizations and advised them and told them, stop collecting water. You're not, you know, this costs $400 to take a pallet of water when it costs $200 to buy it over there. You know, stop taking these, don't do these things. And this is why at this point we were then able to purchase in Puerto Rico and send funds to Puerto Rico. Although we have to be so grateful to a church that lent us their church for 7 months, gave us their church, and they weren't able to have services there, and it was full of pallets while we were transferring pallets. The folks like from Custom Trucking, we, God bless them all, they were always available there, you know, for us. But these were people that had relationships with people in the agenda that made these things possible. But it was very true that there were a lot of people drinking from creeks and from places that were poisonous, and these were tested and tried all the time, and you have to be in that situation to believe it. But when we were in Comerío and we stayed in a place and we were in the bottom of a mountain and there were 3 mountains around us, all you heard all night were generators. Were just generators. Till this day when we were there the other day. Christina mentioned something that I want to touch on. The resources we have amassed, we have architects and planners we're designing the items that Puerto Rico needs, such as how you construct the house from here on, how you use the energy, how do you maximize on what you already have, so that we go to the most poorest areas to present this. Because this is really neat and cool when you have money and you're middle class or upper middle class, that your house has panels on it. But how can we build and rebuild and prepare Puerto Rico for ongoing, and this is what we're doing now, and this more, you want to get some of the specifics, and in getting these resources, having architects, builders that we have identified at Builder, Thermosteel, which has been around since 1971. It is very efficient to see how can we build in Puerto Rico homes that are made out of a product that is super efficient.
Exactly. But before we get to rebuild, can we focus a little bit more on rescue and watch the video for the rescue portion of the 3 R's?
We're working with the Red Cross and the Salvation Army to support the needs of evacuees coming from the island. Here I would like to add a point. While a lot of it is talked about what we're going to be sending, we had a meeting to discuss how we're going to also receive and help people resettle.
Aquí casi 2,000 hemos servido en el centro de bienvenida, y algo que extraordinario que hizo esta ciudad a través del liderato del alcalde, citó el departamento de emergencia de la ciudad de Chicago para que creara una infraestructura en anticipación a esta migración masiva.
I think you're witnessing what 12 years ago, Hurricane Katrina, what I would call the first kind of massive climate change resettlement. This is another case of a climate change resettlement that we now as a country and we as a city have to be prepared for that.
La agenda puertorriqueña lo que está haciendo es facilitando ese proceso de ayudar a Puerto Rico y al mismo tiempo ayudar a los puertorriqueños que quieren venir para Chicago. Con una mano ayudamos a la economía de Puerto Rico, a los artistas de Puerto Rico, a los empresarios de Puerto Rico y a las organizaciones sin fines de lucro en Puerto Rico. Y por otro lado, le damos la mano a los puertorriqueños que necesitan ese momento de claridad, esos meses en el exterior o años o toda la vida que necesiten para recomponer sus vidas.
So I know we touched a little bit about the rescue part where you talked about the pallets and like helping the local community members, but is there any specifics that you want to talk about in regards to the rescue portion?
Sure. The beginning of that clip is a press conference that the mayor held at City Hall, but that was following a strategy meeting in which he had invited all of the heads of the city agencies, as well as key community leaders and organizations, to really just say, look, we have to figure out how are we going to develop a comprehensive plan so that when people touch down from the moment they hit the airport to coming into the community, this welcome center, it was called the MARC, the Multi-Agency Resource Center, that they really, you remove all barriers for them to be able to, one, just begin to process their displacement, and then two, start to put back their lives together. And so in this meeting, it was really clear there's no resources because the feds were not sending anything. So this was going to be a volunteer capacity. And so everyone around the table gave 500%. You know, there was one piece around like, yes, we'll do this. But then following that meeting, there were 4 consecutive days of planning. And then from there, it was really starting to assemble the appropriate kind of collateral to figure out, you know, okay, who do we know in housing? Who's going to be the point person at this agency, this organization? Can they come to the MARC and have a standing time that they're there to do intake? And then thinking about mobilizing not only the city resources, but also the state, the county, the federal resources. It became a one-stop shop. And so it opened up exactly 1 month after that planning process. And that's when, as Alderman Maldonado said, about 2,000 people from that point, from November 2nd all the way through May 1st, which was far longer than what they thought they were going to have to keep the MARC open. But what they were able to really do is make it this, you know, you come in, you can get your state ID, you can get your kids enrolled in childcare or Chicago Public Schools, you can apply for subsidized housing, you can meet with FEMA to report your home, the loss there, you had mental health services, healthcare. I mean, it was just really an amazing demonstration of, you know, how to really pull together with no funding to ensure that those coming in crisis would get their needs met. Now, there's still, you know, a lot of work to be done in terms of case management. A lot of people ended up returning for various reasons. But again, those that are here, we've really tried to be intentional about bringing them in. So meaning that not only providing basic needs, but also providing sort of like that again, that sense of community, right? So leveraging our arts and culture partners, and they would have special community events in which, you know, evacuees would not have to pay. They would get sort of a sense of being back home if there's a parranda or if there's, you know, a special performance, a bomba plena performance. Providing that kind of sense, because I mean, you have to think about the mental trauma that you are encountering when you have lost everything and you're coming to a place, and more than likely people that were coming to Chicago probably had friends or relatives here, but that still isn't enough to make up, you know, the gap, right? And so it just really was a tremendous feat. And now the city has a virtual Hurricane Resource Center, so you can go on the City of Chicago website, and everybody that was there stationed at the mark can now be accessed virtually. And then the Department of Family and Support Services at the Trina Davila Center on North Avenue in Pulaski, they still do case management. So you can still walk in Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and you will have an opportunity to meet with a case manager who will help you walk and navigate through the process.
Yeah, a whole segment of the agenda was engaged in making the mark work, and it took place in Humboldt Park. So we really got to thank the folks in Humboldt Park, Marilyn, the director of the park, all of her staff, without a doubt the mayor and all of those people, but the county, the city, the state agencies that went in there, and then all the folks bringing in donations from food that people, you would go to the mark and we would always tell people, go there, you know, so we can support, but there were so many people all the time there. It was really, there wasn't a moment. So you have to remember, you're in November, December, and January. So temperature's a little different.
Yeah.
In Puerto Rico, we had people with the shock of coats. We had a major coat drive and, you know, get coats or buy coats, and we needed not to waste. So we would have a list of people in their sizes, and we would ask, you know, who has this size of coats? Mm-hmm. If it wasn't used or fairly new or whatever, and we would collect coats. Mm-hmm. And it was just those small things that make a big thing work. No other city in this country, in all of Florida, New York, that received thousands, if not tens of thousands, of Puerto Ricans coming over were as well organized as the mark was, as this mayor put together with all of the other folks, the mark. And I think that put the agenda on the map for being able to put that together. But again, it's all on the membership, that you have people that knew about this.
Mm-hmm.
From the social workers to everybody in education and or organizations. All of the Puerto Rican organizations were there. Aspida, which is the education group, they were there, and they had staff and they had people.
So before we get more into like the on the ground and like the more government side of, you know, this crisis, let's just watch the video for the last R, which is rebuild, although you already talked a little bit about it, but so we can go a little more into detail.
Since the beginning, we have raised nearly $400,000, and we can say that money has come back to Puerto Rico in the form of micro grants. Total, we have touched 30 towns.
Grassroots initiatives throughout the diaspora and local efforts on the island, not the federal government, have saved lives in Puerto Rico. San Juan Mayor Carmen Yulín Cruz praised Chicago as a first responder and continued supporter. She keeps the video on her personal cell phone, showing truckloads of emergency supplies making their way to the distribution center just days after the storm.
I gotta just say, if the government, right, would have simply followed the example of the American people, because the American people are immensely generous and giving and caring and loving. If our government was simply a reflection of the will of the people, wow, right now Puerto Rico would have electricity and water, and things would have been stabilized.
Since September, members have made numerous visits to deliver aid directly to those in need. During a March visit, along with the Chicago delegation, Puerto Rican Agenda co-chair Cristina Pacioni Sayas shares the observations for analyzing the situation and what remains to be done.
And we're now ready and stronger than ever in terms of building this island back with Puerto Rican labor, Puerto Rican investments to be that 21st century island. This is an unfortunate event, but it's an opportunity for us to transform the island in the way that we always wanted it to be: strong, safe, and a collective enterprise where Puerto Ricans are determining their own destiny and actualization. So thank you.
So can you tell us a little bit
So
more?
we're engaged in so many projects. I don't know where to start, but we have some of the ones that were very important for us was the support for the artists. You see, because some of the folks that were really leaving, it was dangerous to lose the culture and the from musicians to artists schools. We supported an art school, a cultural school in Puerto Rico. We went out to the countryside. Some of the people that were hardest hits were the small agricultural projects. So we went into a cooperative and we supported a woman that was engaged in agricultural projects, and she wanted to help the young people understand how important it was to plant and to use the land wisely. So we're supporting that organization. We gave them a micro grant, and we're continuously supporting the whole cooperative of about 25 agriculture folks. These are all young people. To our surprise, they're young people, 30-something, 20-something, that are engaged in agriculture. We have one in Mayagüez, we have one in San Sebastián and Moca, and we connect with the local elected officials, and we ask them, regardless of party affiliation, we ask them, what is your greatest need? And there are folks that cannot move product. We saw someone that cannot move milk, and they're throwing away tens of thousands of liters of milk because the roads were not built. So we were able to connect and reconnect people in doing these are the more detailed projects that we've been engaged in. We're helping a city to design an emergency center. We had a big contribution. We gave $40,000 to build a model. Now there are 78 cities and towns and municipalities in Puerto Rico, and each municipality has tens of thousands of acres, a lot of square mileage. So sometimes you have a town that its furthest barrio area is about 10 miles away in running roads. So it's very difficult to get there. So our idea is to help build this model of an emergency center so we can duplicate it into the hardest hits with modern technology, solar panels. We want to dig 30 feet into the ground and pull out the thermal energy that we have for air conditioning, for water distribution, and so on. So these are more of the long-term projects that we have, and we're engaged with architects and folks that are working with Tesla and builders that are doing. These are more pretty specific, but that's one project of more than dozens that we're involved in.
One of our biggest contributors is the Chicago Community Trust. They had been following obviously what had been happening in Puerto Rico, and they had, sent out some money to the community foundations there, but they thought it was really important to contribute to our campaign, particularly because we were able to be very transparent about our processes and how our money was being spent and the impact it was making. And so they made a gift to us of $100,000 that we could then use to continue our investments in rebuilding, to support some resettlement efforts, and issue some micro grants. And so what Charlie was referencing in terms of the investment in Comerío is one of two towns that we designated, Adaptemos un Pueblo. Comerío is one, and Loíza is the other. And they kind of also represent the quintessential, geography of Puerto Rico, Comerío being in, the campo, and then Loíza being on the coast. Both hard hit, both have populations that have been marginalized over time. And so with the investment in Comerío, we are doing another investment in Loíza to really support the development of community brigades to be able to rebuild their own roofs. So again, really being intentional about leveraging the natural resources in Puerto Rico, but also the natural born talent. It's important that you don't just give people fish. You teach them how to fish. You teach them how to organize. So that I'd like to be out of a job. I want them to be able to take care of it. And so that's been sort of what's guided our investments in the rebuild work.
One of the areas that we need support in, for those that are watching, that maybe they have a corporation, a firm that they like to support real projects, is in May we were able to gather universities, Wisconsin, Minnesota, IIT, and a couple of corporate builders, some of the top builders here in the city of Chicago. We went and did a strategy conference and to take a look at different options. This is very important because we want to take technology over to Puerto Rico, new technology, train folks, even for the potential to build factories for these kind of things, to get the most updated technologies. We have a professor at IIT that has some very creative things, and we saw that, and we were able to facilitate. To this day, a lot of these people pay for their own way, and we really need to encourage folks when people ask, what can we do? And those real funds, again, we don't have staff, we don't have people, we pay our own way to go there. We make these contributions. We want to continue that in the areas of agriculture, in the areas of technology, in the areas of making use of natural resources and converting that into energy. So that's where we're at in this process of the rebuild of Puerto Rico.
Wonderful. Well, I believe that we've covered a lot about like the Puerto Rican agenda and the things that you all have been doing and are still doing today. But we're winding down and we have about a minute left. So
how time flies.
Exactly. So is there anything you want? Because I know the Puerto Rican agenda and like the relationships that you have in Puerto Rico, like you all have been collectively working towards, rebuilding Puerto Rico, but is there anything the viewers can do to help this crisis?
So there's several different things. I think, one of the main ones, again, what the crisis revealed is the lack of knowledge that the general public has about Puerto Rico, about our experience, our history, the relationship with the United States. That lack of knowledge is actually the root cause of why the federal government operated in the same way that it did. There is not only an ignorance, but there is also a disdain, and the institutions and the structures that support that support colonialism and that support institutional racism are what keep those types of reactions in place. And so I really would encourage the general public to learn more about Puerto Rico, to learn more about the relationship. And then the other piece is to stay in touch with us. We are active on social media, and we are always looking for different ways to involve people. We will put you to work. We want to leverage your talent, your skills, your relationships. And so I think if you can visit us at PuertoRicanChicago.org or on our Facebook page and Twitter handle, the Puerto Rican Agenda of Chicago, you will be able to know our latest and greatest in terms of all of the work. And I think just, keeping Puerto Rico in the discourse, it's really critical to continue the dialogue.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us here at CAN TV and continuously working towards, bettering the lives for your brothers and sisters in Puerto Rico, and for doing what you do, because again, like you said, it's all based on volunteering, and like, spending time and energy to make a difference in the world. So thank you all. Thank you for tuning in to CAN TV Channel 21. Have a great day.